Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick lays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for May the 15th, episode number 1483. I am an injured Keith Alsep, a badly bruised lower leg from a pickoff attempt that squared me up right in the shin, and I'm still having more tests as the x-rays were inconclusive. I could have a hairline fracture. It may be a bone bruise, but trust me, as ugly as my face is, my leg looks much worse, but able to do the show today. I've been on some Tylenol 3 and a lot of ice and elevation, and it's kind of tough to walk right now. But anyway, let's jump right into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. That is the greater Charlotte area. Nana's Porch, whether you're in Lancaster, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, in that area, in the greater Charlotte area, Nana's Porch is your go-to for all your catering needs. Also, jump in on Nana's Porch chat box. Leave your questions, comments for me in just a few minutes. We will be joined by Hale McGranahan, the hardest working man I know on the Gamecock football recruiting beat. And then tomorrow, quite a treat. Man, I'm a poet and didn't even know it. Peyton Titus from the state and Go Gamecocks will be in to fill us in on all the latest Gamecock women's basketball news, as well as the WNBA season, which I'll have a couple notes on that. And so Nana's Porch, whether it is a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. Also, if you need an event with a food trailer, get in touch with Nana's Porch. Voted among the top 3 food trailers in Charlotte. All right, I do apologize for that. That's my yard guy. I guess he can't tell time. But at any rate, Nana's Porch can. They're always on time. Voted among the top 3 food trailers in Charlotte. So I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business by going to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. And as we all know, their award-winning pimento cheese voted both #1 and #2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. #1, smoky jalapeno, which is my personal favorite, and then the great regular flavor voted #2. All right, Gamecock baseball, after getting absolutely boat raced, swept, humiliated, battered, bruised, now stands at 33-18 and 13-14. In the SEC, they were 13-11 and in prime position with a series win to lock down a host. I don't know how, but they're still ranked in the top 25. But that was just a bad look. And quite frankly, now they get to go on the road to end the season and face top-ranked Tennessee, which will be an uphill climb. Gamecocks lose 14-10 on Thursday in the opener that really was not as close as the score indicated. Gamecocks were down 12-4 in that one. Neither starting pitcher even got out of the first inning. Friday night, 11-5, and then Gamecocks led 6-4 going into the 8th inning and got beat 14-6, and just a total collapse from this Gamecock pitching staff. And quite frankly, I think we have reached an inflection point for the Mark Kingston era, quite frankly. South Carolina has not been to Omaha since 2014, maybe 2013. And just a really bad look. Getting humiliated at home. I know a lot of people that were at those games. It was just embarrassing. And quite frankly, this is not the baseball program that South Carolina deserves. I'm just going to go ahead and go on my rant here, okay? South Carolina baseball, when Ray Tanner decided, when a bunch of old women that are really into pens right now that run the board of trustees decided they were going to give Ray Tanner the athletic director's job after 3 straight trips to Omaha. That was basically South Carolina baseball at that point was essentially like Alabama football under Nick Saban. Not as many national championships, but we are talking about historically the greatest program in the history of South Carolina sports over the last 50 plus years. Now, granted, Dawn Staley and what she's done, particularly over the last 10 years, has been the greatest stretch for any program. 3 national championships, 5 Final Fours, and a lot more. But from Bobby Richardson to June Raines to Ray Tanner, South Carolina has historically been in Omaha and competed for national championships. They finished runners-up several times. I know in 75 they finished runner-up to Texas. In 1977 they finished runner-up to Bob Horner and Arizona State. I'm pretty sure Ray Tanner finished runner-up, and then they won it twice, 2010, 2011, and then in 2012 finished runner-up to just a red-hot Arizona team. South Carolina's not been back since 2012 to Omaha. 12 years through Chad Holbrook and now Mark Kingston. And credit to a poster on the BigSpur.com for putting up the run differential for South Carolina during the Mark Kingston era against SEC and Clemson. Okay, and the total is minus 126 runs during his career. Okay, South Carolina has outscored Florida by 8. By Georgia, after them boat racing us, it's back to even. Minus 35 against Tennessee, minus 10 against Vanderbilt, minus 15 against Auburn, minus 14 against Alabama, minus 34 against Mississippi State, minus 32 against Arkansas, minus 26 against A&M, and minus 16 against Clemson. That's less than stellar. Okay, now granted, we are not in the postseason. Ole Miss, a couple years ago, limped to the finish line in the regular season, got hot, and made it all the way to Omaha. So certainly South Carolina has that opportunity. But how likely is that with the way this pitching staff is just collapsing? I mean, yeah, you can score runs, but the further along you get in the SEC tournament, that's a big ballpark in Hoover. Balls are not flying out of there like they are Founders Park. And you're going to run into some great SEC pitching. And then when you get, South Carolina certainly will not be a 1 seed now in a regional, barring probably a sweep of Tennessee and a couple of wins in the SEC tournament, which I can't even remember the last time South Carolina won 2 games in Hoover. You're looking at going on the road in the regionals. And if you go to Wake Forest, they just swept Clemson. That's the current projection. I know a lot of people, they want South Carolina and Clemson's regional. Guess what? You're not getting out of that regional. Clemson is going to spank your behind in that regional, in all likelihood, based off of how South Carolina's pitching is performing down the stretch. And it's unacceptable. Okay, if you get swept at Tennessee and you finish 13-17 in the SEC and you don't make a major run in Hoover, you may get left out. I mean, at that point, you're 33-21. I mean, maybe because of strength of schedule and RPI, you do get in. But, I mean, quite frankly, South Carolina baseball is all about the postseason. We are not there yet. But barring a miraculous turnaround, the Mark Kingston era should be over, barring a major turnaround. And quite frankly, I don't know if I want Ray Tanner making a decision on who the next coach is. I just don't. I don't know very many people that have confidence in Ray Tanner. Maybe he can finally go get a guy like a Dan McDonald from Louisville or someplace like that. Maybe they can go and get a young, upcoming, hot coach right now that's winning. Or maybe they give it to Monty Lee. I don't know. But South Carolina baseball is at an inflection point, and getting boat raced at home by Georgia and now going on the road to Tennessee, if you don't bounce back, this is a season on the brink right now and an inflection point for South Carolina baseball. And quite frankly, I just don't know a lot of Gamecock fans that would jump up and down on their soapbox to say, hey, Mark Kingston's my guy. Let's bring him back. I mean, on top of the fact his daughter decided to go to Clemson and he let her, and with how weird and just uneven this guy is talking to people close to the program. I mean, I love Matt Williams. I love Monty Lee. But Mark Kingston may be sealing his own fate here with a late season collapse. So we'll see what happens. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Thursday and Friday's game, 6:30. Then you get a Saturday afternoon game, all three games streaming on the SEC Network Plus. That's a 1 o'clock game at Knoxville on Saturday, Thursday, and Friday night at 6:30. And, you know, Eli Jones has got to bounce back. A lot of these pitchers need to bounce back, but you're facing the number one team in the country in Tennessee, so we'll see. All right, let's get off of baseball. It's really depressing me. Gamecock football, their SEC season opener, the time was announced, for week 2 at Kentucky. That is the SEC season opener. That will be at 3:30 on ABC. Gamecocks will face Kentucky at 3:30 in Lexington on ABC in the SEC opener for both teams. ABC will kick off their SEC coverage on August 31st with Clemson versus Georgia. I think that will be at 7:30. Then on September 7th, you get South Carolina at Kentucky at 3:30 on ABC. That will be part of a doubleheader. Later that night, Tennessee versus NC State in Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium on ABC, September the 14th. You get Georgia at Kentucky. And by the way, Georgia, ABC is the Georgia Football Network. They open the season on ABC. They get that game on the 14th, September the 28th. You get Georgia at Alabama, and then November the 2nd, you get Florida versus Georgia. The other game that's been announced, part of that September 14th doubleheader, will be Texas A&M at Florida at 3:30 on ABC. Same day as Georgia at Kentucky. All right, according to the state's Peyton Titus and the Hall of Fame Series website, South Carolina women's basketball, their opponent on November the 4th in Las Vegas, is announced. The Gamecocks will open the season in Las Vegas on November the 4th in the Hall of Fame Series versus the Michigan Wolverines. You kind of get an SEC Big Ten doubleheader here, as the other game in this doubleheader will be Texas versus Ohio State. Gamecock women's basketball SEC opponents were named yesterday, and the Gamecocks will get a home and home with Texas, which is what you want, because those are the top two teams in the SEC. Both will be national championship contenders. Vic Schaefer and the Longhorns will get point guard Rory Harmon back. Okay, Madison Booker is back, as are a number of key players off of last year's team that lost in the regional final in an upset to NC State. Texas was the number one series. Again, more on that tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily in my conversation with the state women's basketball beat writer, Peyton Titus. All right, men's basketball. Former Vanderbilt signee and Oak Hill power forward or center Jamie Benson begins his official visit at South Carolina today. He was at Rice to start the week. I know there's a lot of confidence on South Carolina's end here. You do have the connection with Yerrick Stoneman, former longtime head coach in Columbia, now back at Oak Hill, where he's once time served as the assistant to legendary Oak Hill coach Steve Smith. I like Jamie Benson. I think he's got a lot of upside. I do think he's a developmental prospect, but with South Carolina probably losing both starting front court players for this coming season in Colin Murray Boyles, who will certainly test the NBA draft process, and 6'10", 230-pound Alabama transfer Nick Pringle. Adding Benson would give the Gamecocks a pair of 2024 big men to pair him with very athletic Oku Federico, and you would have another young big in Greenville native and Missouri transfer Jordan Butler, 7 foot, 230 pounds, who'll be a sophomore. So that'd give you three young bigs in your program. You've got a 2025 6'8", 235-pound commitment in Hayden Simeon from Powdersville. And so Lamont Paris building up the front court here, and they would love to add Jamie Benson to that roster. All right, the WNBA opened their season on Tuesday, Saturday, and again, we'll have more on this tomorrow. Asia Wilson and the Aces boat raced the Puerto Rican national team in her homecoming in Colombia. Over 13,500 fans, I believe, maybe 13,300, turned out for her first game back at Colonial Life Arena since they played their last game in 2018. It was also announced Asia Wilson will get her signature Nike shoe, the A1s, which will be released in the spring of 2025. Okay, last night, the Connecticut Sun and Ty Harris, who are now covered by former Greenville News beat writer and friend of the program, Emily Adams, they defeated the Indiana Fever 92-71. Of course, that was Caitlin Clark's much-awaited debut, and she had a double-double, 20 points and 10 turnovers. Connecticut beat them 92-71. Clark was 5 for 15 from the field, 4 for 11 from 3. Aaliyah Boston just 4 points. They don't run any plays for her. They don't put her in enough pick and pop situations. I think they're a horribly coached team. And it was all Caitlin Clark and Alyssa Smith. Clark, 15 field goal attempts. And Alyssa Smith, 12 field goal attempts, 13 points. So not a very good shooting night. Former Gamecock National Championship point guard Ty Harris had 16 points on 6 of 11 and was 4 for 6 from downtown. She also had 2 assists and no turnovers. Asia Wilson and the WNBA champion Las Vegas Aces defeated the Phoenix Mercury last night, 89-80. Wilson with a team-high 30 points on 10 of 22 from the field and 10 of 11 from the free throw line. It was a double-double, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, and 1 steal for the best player in the world. All right, let's go to my interview from a little earlier this morning with Hale McGranahan, extensively talking Gamecock football recruiting. Here is my interview with Hale McGranahan. All right, and we welcome back in to Gamecock Pod Live, the hardest working man on the Gamecock recruiting beat and resident 49ers fan extraordinaire, Hale McGranahan. Hale, how's it going?
Hey, doing well, Keith. How are you this fine morning here in Columbia?
I'm doing well. It looks like the rain left Texas and has found the Midlands.
Yeah, I don't mind. It helps my grass get a little greener and look better than the weeds that are taking over.
Yeah, it's a little nicer when it's more green than it is brown. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so Hale, let's jump right in. The news everybody is wondering about. 6'11" Jamie Vinson from Oak Hill Academy visiting Lamont Paris. I know you've been all over this. What's your prediction?
Did you mean to get Whittle on here for that one? Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine, but based on what I've seen from Whittle, I think it's happened. I don't know. I'm strictly an observer, a casual observer when it comes to basketball.
All right, so you don't know Dawn Staley's top 3 targets for the 2025 recruiting class?
Can't say that I do. No, sorry. My bad.
After going 38-0 and winning the national championship, it ought to be whoever she wants, basically.
Probably, right? I mean, that seems like a logical statement to me, at least.
No doubt. So it's almost time for the annual Summer of Shane. 2 weeks from this weekend, football camps start, official visits start. And we were talking right before we went live. I think right before the spring game we had you on. And at that point, the Gamecocks, Caleb Williams and Shamari Earls, that were 2 big pickups that you talked about. Caleb Williams as a guy you weren't quite ready to put the crystal ball pick in for, but if he came for the spring game, follow the visits. I'm pretty sure these are the latest 2 commitments for the Gamecocks, both out of the state of Virginia. Your thoughts on Caleb Williams and Shamari Earls, 2 4-star pickups for the Gamecocks.
My thing with Williams, and I believe I probably laid it out this way a few weeks back before the spring game, was he had just visited like a week or two before that and was down for maybe a Saturday. So I wasn't sure if that meant that he just moved his visit up because he'd planned the spring game visit pretty well in advance. And all of a sudden, just kind of out of nowhere, he's in a couple weeks before that. So I didn't know if they just adjusted the schedule. And I wasn't able to confirm that he was definitely going to be back for the spring game. And he certainly came back and committed. So that to me was like, hey, if he's back down from the Richmond area, which is a decent little drive in a couple weeks, within a couple weeks span, I thought that was a good sign. And here we are talking about him and Shamari Earls, two of the best players from that area, and probably pissed off a lot of Hokies and Cavs along the way. And they're two of the best players in South Carolina's commitment class right now. So it's with Earls, I'm kind of curious to see who else pops up, because, I mean, LSU just offered him about a week or so ago, and Williams has gotten an offer from Charlotte recently. So I don't know if like anybody else is going to try to sway them from those decisions. I would have to imagine so, but for right now, I guess the honeymoon period is still on, and we can sit here and talk about how good South Carolina should feel, as they should if they make it to the finish line. I'm not trying to imply anything. There's anything to worry about, but they're really good players, and those type of guys tend to command interest on the market even when they're committed. So I like those two gets for sure for Carolina, and certainly addresses two positions of need. Defensive tackle being the biggest in this class, just because how many guys are coming off the books. I think we've talked about this for probably a couple of years now, Keith, about all these older guys. I mean, it's like 4 of them who signed or committed to Will Muschamp. So they've been around for a long time, and it's a tremendous need, obviously. So then there's cornerback, where you're always needing guys there too, like defensive tackle. But Donald Fortune is a senior, and then it's a bunch of young guys right now working along with him and behind him. And you're just going to need more guys every year at that position, especially as teams continue to just throw it like crazy. So big gets, and they're certainly not done that defensive tackle and cornerback, but really, really nice places to start with those two guys.
No doubt. So let's talk about South Carolina, the most recent in-state offer. Eastside defensive end, Jaquavius Dodd, 6'5", 6'6", 225, 230. Evidently, he had a pretty good camp at that Charlotte Under Armour camp. I know Sterling Lucas went up and visited him at spring practice. They pulled the trigger. Sounds like, I mean, you need guys that can come in and play immediately, but you also need guys that you can develop. And this seems like a guy that may fit in the latter category, but a big, rangy basketball player looking athlete that South Carolina's offering.
Yeah, Eastside High School. I would like to talk about a guy who's at Eastside like he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, because that's where I went to high school, and I'm probably a little more critical of guys who are from that particular area, because I know the football is not the greatest. Like, generally speaking, it's not. There's not a lot of high level players coming out of there. Though there have been a couple here these last couple of years with Marcus Downs, the defensive tackle from Riverside, which is right down the road, literally on the same street, for those who aren't familiar with the area. And then they got a receiver there, Mikkel Skinner, and this defensive end, Quay Dodd. He goes by Quay. So he's how you draw him up, man. Like, if you had to create a player in this new college football game that's coming out this summer, and you're making a defensive end recruit, like 6'5", 230 with extremely long arms and is a pretty good athlete, like, you take that all day. he does have he's got some room to grow as a player for sure. He's got to get better there. But if you're gonna take a flyer on somebody, 6'5", 230 with 80+ inch wingspan, that's where you want to go when you're trying to take a flyer at defensive end. So very intriguing prospect for sure. I think that's the best way to try to frame him is he's a prospect. It's a project. He's going to need to get better wherever he ends up, whether it's South Carolina or App State. He's a guy that's going to need some time to develop as a player. And if he does, he could be really good because he's got the frame and is going to continue to look the part, no doubt. So intriguing as a prospect, but you know, when you're talking about rolling the dice on a player, if it's on an in-state guy again with that type of body, that's not the worst thing in the world.
All right, good stuff. So has he set an official visit to South Carolina as of yet? Is he coming to camp?
Yeah, nothing official yet. Whether it's an unofficial visit or a camp, he's still figuring that out. I was pretty sure he was going to come in for a camp before the offer went out. I don't know if that's changed now, but he came down last summer for camp, and he's visited unofficially, I think, at least a couple of times since then, including earlier this spring. So he'll be back at some point in June. What that looks like, I don't know right now. So nothing confirmed yet.
So can you name the greatest two East Side High School alumni players that played at the University of South Carolina?
One would be Andre Goodman. He is the best. Yeah. Do you mean played football at the University of South Carolina?
Yep.
Well, there's one on the team right now in Peyton Mangrum, who's
I wouldn't consider him
probably not your answer. Do what?
I wouldn't consider him an all-time great.
No, I didn't. And no offense to Peyton Mangrum, by all accounts,
Right,
he's a great guy and well respected on the team. But I don't know who's the other.
Linebacker Paul Vogel. He was on the Black Magic team in 1984, and good friend of mine went to high school with him. And South Carolina was down at halftime. Well, right before halftime, they were down 21-3. They kicked a field goal from the 10-yard line. It was 4th and goal from the 10 to make it 21-6, and they ran into the kicker. Mm-hmm. Joe Morrison took the points off the board, and on 4th and 5, they ran a trap play to Quentin Lewis, playing for the injured Kent Haygood. And they trapped Michael Dean and William Perry. Buddy Quarles did, the father of who I went to school with, of Kelsey Quarles. And he went right in the end zone. And at halftime, evidently there were words between Vogel and Joe Morrison at the urinals in the male bathroom. And Morrison asked him, "What do you think?" Vogel said, "If we turn it into a street fight in the second half, we're going to kick their ass." And so South Carolina did come back to win that game 22-21. Vogel.
Tell me Vogel's first name again. I have not heard of him. I'm a little disappointed.
Paul Vogel, number 44. Okay. He played right beside another guy, number 45, the late, great James Seawright, also an upstate guy from Hillcrest High School.
Okay, right on down 385 on the way to Columbia. There you go.
That's right. All right. So how about one commitment that looks like was a really good evaluation that seems to be showing out in camps, and that is Concord wide receiver Brian Rowe, guy that had a basketball background. His high school coach talked about Jalen Brooks, and this guy could be the best he's ever seen. But Brian Rowe, I mean, that seems to be another sneaky good get, maybe like a J.R. Johnson type get where he's a 3-star and then he starts blowing up and becomes maybe a 4-star guy. Your thoughts on Brian Rowe?
Yeah, he plays at Robinson High School for Jason Seidel, which is in Concord, North Carolina, and Seidel coached Brooks when he was at, I think it was Hickory Ridge High School, which is like South Charlotte, Southeast. But yeah, I think the comment Seidel made to me was that Rowe's the most athletic. He's more athletic than Brooks. That's kind of paraphrasing a little bit. Rowe, if you see his Twitter, anybody who's listening who's on Twitter, or even if you're not on Twitter, look him up because his dunks on there, and they're not just him messing around. He's doing the stuff in game, and it's pretty ridiculous. And he's like 5'11", so there's a lot of upside there. His jump, and you just look at his stats from what he did as a sophomore, and he had like 25 catches for 300 yards somewhere in that neighborhood. And last season he's up over 1,000 yards, and I can't remember exactly how many catches he had, but he didn't have a ton of catches. Like he had a nice yards per clip there, and so you start adding these little things up, and it makes sense that he's starting to turn some heads. And I talked to some of our rankings folks about him before they got him rated and all that, and it's like, hey, and what I said about the dunks is like, hey, look at the dunks and get back to me. And I think we're going to see him as a 4-star before too long. Like watch the tape from his junior year, and he's still got room to grow too. Not only physically, but as a player. And there's some upside, and I think it's going to continue. He's going to continue to be a really good player, and just only get better from here. James Coley offered him after he left and went to Georgia, and Coley was who offered him at South Carolina. So a lot of things to say about James Coley. To be fair, he is the one who got the ball rolling for the Gamecocks. So I suspect there'll be some folks who are maybe trying to poach Brian Rowe at some point along the way if they aren't already. So he's a very good player, man. Good receiver. Even though he and Jaden Sellers are kind of carbon copies of each other physically, I think that's a really nice tandem of receivers for this class. There's been a lot of issues recruiting at that position these last few years. Even going back before the Beamer staff got here, like it's been a while since South Carolina's had like a legitimate, like no worries type of receiving recruiting class. If they can get Sellers and Rowe and one or two other guys in this class, it'll be as good as it's been in a while. Like, not to get too into the past, but it's the things are trending in the right direction is what I'm trying to say with the receiver recruiting at South Carolina, and Brian Rowe's a big part of it.
No doubt. So let's stick with wide receiver for just a second. And by the way, Brian Rowe was one of the 2 MVPs of that Charlotte Under Armour camp. So that performance certainly will probably help him in the eyes of the rankings guys. So South Carolina had a pair of 4-star wide receivers on the docket for official visits. 6'5" Derek Meadows from Las Vegas and Lex Cyrus, a kind of smaller slot receiver from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. They're off the list, and right now it appears the only other wide receiver who's currently on the official visit list is the kid from Rock Hill, Malik Clark, 6'1", 183. I mean, North Carolina has some crystal ball picks, but I know you have written and others that this could be more of a toss-up and official visits could decide. It really sting to lose a Rock Hill kid to Matt Brown and the Tar Heels. Your thoughts on Malik Clark and where that stands.
Yeah, that would not be good. Let me start there. That would be less than ideal. North Carolina has been a little bit of a thorn in the side, sort of off and on the recruiting trail over the years, and they're back to being a thorn right now with Marshall Pritchett, tight end, who is originally from Charleston. He's committed to him now, and if they can get Clark, that would just further add to that. But yeah, I'm not quite there yet. Maybe North Carolina does lead. There's a lot of people in that state seem to believe that the Tar Heels have the advantage, but I certainly don't think it's a done deal quite yet. So still some work to be done for everybody is sort of my take on Malik Clark right now. And he's certainly been blowing it up this spring, running track and getting ready to try to go win the 100 meter and the 5A track meet here on Friday, I believe it is. Ran a 10.55 in the upper states. So whether it's North Carolina or South Carolina, when he commits, which could be sometime this summer, I suspect he's going to continue to be recruited by folks because he's a really good player. Probably going to be a 4-star at some point before too long, and a pretty firm 4-star at that. So,
yeah, I mean, guys that run sub 10.6, I mean, that's pretty elite speed on the football field for sure.
Yeah, and he's 6'1". I don't know how much he weighs for sure. I can't remember. Like around 190, let's call it that. So he's got some pretty legit size too. It's not like he's a 5'10" guy who weighs 165 and doing that. He's
like most of South Carolina's current wide receivers.
And there's nothing wrong with having guys like that, but you need some height and length out there on the perimeter to be able to go out and make plays, which is something that Shane Beamer's certainly talked about in the media, including last night.
So that's a great segue right into my next question. Shane Beamer spoke publicly for the first time on South Carolina's latest 2 transfer portal wide receiver commitments. Those have happened since we had you on the last time. Dale Von Campbell, who's a kid out of the Houston area that went to Illinois, really didn't do a whole lot, went to Nevada, was really good there, even though their team sucked. Let's just call it like it is. 6'4", 220, had 70 catches the last 2 years up there, led the Mountain West in yards per reception at 19.2 yards per reception. He's an older guy with 1 year of eligibility. And then Vandrevius Jacobs, I mean, that's got to be on the all-name team, Vandrevius. 6 foot, about 185. Went to the same high school as Gilbert Edmond. They were teammates at FSU last year. He redshirted, played in 4 games plus the bowl game. The scouting report on him seems to be he's really fast, shifty, was a highly recruited player. Your thoughts on these 2 guys and what Shane Beamer had to say about them?
Yeah, Campbell's an interesting player. Well, they're both interesting in their own ways, but you mentioned Campbell being an older guy, and he is. I mean, he's been in college football since 2019, but he played that entire freshman year at Illinois at 17 years old. He didn't turn 18 till December the 5th, which is my birthday, my sister's birthday. So he wasn't 18 until then. So he goes through 2020, which was 2020. I mean, that was a weird year, obviously. Then 21, I believe it is. I think I'm on track there. It was Brett Bielema's first year at Illinois, and he played a lot of special teams. Campbell did, and didn't. I guess it wasn't a fit for him, and he hit the portal and went to Nevada, and teams weren't very good, but he produced at a relatively good level for the type of team he was on, and here we are. He's 6'4", 220 or whatever he is, but he's a big guy, and you watch him watch him make plays on YouTube, and he's giving you something like I said a second ago about having a big guy, tall, long arms who can go make plays on the perimeter, make a contested catch. Maybe he's making contested catches because he's not the fastest. I don't know what kind of foot speed he's got, but he adds an element that this team needs from a size standpoint at receiver. Obviously, there's Nick Harbor, who's got size and speed, but this guy is much more polished and definitely so far more productive player at the college level. So a good fit for what South Carolina needed, and I suspect he'll be playing a lot this fall. And Vandrevis Jacobs, I don't know how much he's going to play this fall or moving forward. Probably kind of up to him. He's a really talented guy who if he's able to put it all together, he could be very good. And I don't think the folks at Florida State wanted to see him leave because of that, but I don't think they were necessarily in a hurry to keep him around because he just wasn't doing all the stuff that they wanted him to. And apparently Mike Norvell runs a tight ship down there, believe it or not. So didn't play a lot last year because Florida State had a lot on offense. Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson and Jaheim Bell and some backs, and I'm sure there's some other receivers that I could mention who were pretty productive players for him. But he was just stuck waiting his turn on a really good team and decided to hop in the portal this spring and could be a sneaky good pickup for South Carolina that nobody's really talking about from a national standpoint, like outside of your show and others like it here around Carolina. Nobody's talking about Vandrevis Jacobs signing with the Gamecocks. And 6 months from now, 7 months from now, that might be very different. But again, it's going to be up to him. If he comes in with the right attitude and right willingness to work, he's going to make a difference sooner than later. So two really intriguing pickups for Carolina.
No doubt. So official visits and Shane Beamer's first camp begin on May 31st. Let's talk about a small school guy, very intriguing player, Jaquel Holman out of Blackville Hilda, a place that I know well from my time at Bethune High School. One of the wildest times I've ever had in my life was when I was at Bethune. We played JV games on Monday, Thursday because of the travel. Varsity games were Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday I was usually going to scout somebody, particularly the closer we got to the playoffs. So I was at the Blackville Hilda gym when they were playing Denmark OLAR. And some guy, well, first of all, I think I might have been probably the lightest colored dude in the gym, number one. Number two, they were packed 4 deep on the baselines behind the baskets. The bleachers were packed. And this guy dunks it and gets fouled. And everybody under that basket come running out onto the floor high-fiving him. I mean, we know Larry Davis from Denmark OLAR, Blackville Hildas, had a lot of really great athletes. But Jaquel Holman seems like a big, fast man that plays at a small school, and he's kind of flying under the radar. Is he scheduled to be at that camp? And what's your thoughts on him as an athlete?
Yeah, he's supposed to be at the camp on May 31st. He's running. Speaking of the state track meet, he's running in the 1A. Blackville Hill is a 1A school. 1A 100 meter, 200 meter, and I think he's on the 4x100 too. And he finished first in the 100 and 200, and I can't remember if they're upper state or lower state. I guess probably lower state, maybe. I don't know. It's weird. Everybody
used
knows.
to be upper state. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, maybe it is upper state. Anyway, but he's he finished first in whatever meet he ran in last week to qualify for state. Ran 10.83 in the 100, and he's probably going to win state in that. And I would guess.
How big is he?
He's about 6'1". We got him on 24/7, 6'1", 193, but I think he might be closer to 200 pounds by now. So he's a big dude who can run. And Clayton White and Torian Gray like him a lot, and they want to get him working out in front of the head coach. And we've seen how that has gone for those particular coaches in the past, whether it was Nicky Manworthy or David Busey, or like you mentioned earlier, Fred J.R. Johnson. They've got some pretty intriguing players that way, and this one's pretty similar to him as far as recruiting stature. I mean, Jaquel Holman, I created his profile, I don't know, probably a few months ago, and we got him as a running back. I think he's a pretty good running back, but I think most folks see him as a linebacker or safety at the next level. Doesn't have any stars, obviously. Only offers on there are Old Dominion and the Citadel. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has an offer from South Carolina here in about 2 weeks. And he's a good player too. He doesn't just have like good track times and doesn't look the part. If you watch his highlights, he's very good. I know it's 1A, but he's doing things against 1A competition that you would hope to see from a guy who could play in the SEC potentially. So another under the radar guy who Clayton White and Torian Gray are definitely all over right now.
All right, so Hale, I got some defensive and offensive targets that are scheduled for official visits I wanted to ask you about. So we'll start with defense first. I think this is an important class for South Carolina in the secondary. Certainly, already having guys like Shamari Earls and DeMarcus Leach, I think that's really big. I did want to ask about a couple of other defensive backs, and that is former Ohio State commit Jonte Gilbert, 6'1", 185 out of Atlanta Douglas. It seems like is his stock kind of down? What's the latest with him? I know he's scheduled to come in and visit the Gamecocks in June. At one point, I think Clemson had momentum. I'm not sure if he's still visiting them or not, but is this a guy that is still a no-brainer for South Carolina?
I mean, I think he's pretty good. I don't really know. I'm trying to, as you were sitting there talking about, I was trying to pull up his rating history from 24/7. But I mean, we've known about him for a couple years now.
Yeah, forever.
Right, and he's not even done with his junior year. Let me see. My computer's being weird. Okay, so when he was first rated about a year ago, he was a 92. He's a 91 now. So he's dropped a point on that. So it's not like he's fallen too heavily one way. So yeah, he was committed to Ohio State. Early commit from Georgia to Ohio State, and he was looking around then, like pretty early on after he committed. Like he was talking to other people. So committed early, decommitted from a big school, had some interest in Clemson. We all know Clemson's does whatever they do on the recruiting trail. So, trying to be careful with how I say this. Sometimes if they're on a guy and then all of a sudden they're not, or eventually they're not on them anymore, like there's quote unquote an issue. And I'm not even trying to say what this issue might be, because I don't even know if there is one. Like
or maybe they know they're not going to get it.
Yeah, that probably is all it boils down to. And maybe they have some, criteria that they use to recruit guys, and they do. And so maybe if he doesn't check one of those boxes, then hey, whatever. I'm not going to try to say much beyond that. So, and you look at who he's being recruited by now, it's NC State, Duke, UCF, South Carolina. I mean, Georgia State's in there, I think mostly probably because of Del McGee, former Georgia assistant. I mean, he was involved with Georgia for a while, obviously. Gilbert was involved with Georgia for a while, and it seems that's kind of ended. And I don't know what their holdup is, but it's also Georgia who recruits like better than just about everybody else in the country. So they get their pick of the litter every year. So sometimes guys just aren't good enough to play at Georgia, even though they're from Atlanta and are really good players. That's just a reality of it. And if they're not a defensive tackle, then Kirby's not going to necessarily always go out of his way to get them all. So I think he's a good player. I don't know what the holdup is for some people, and people, I mean, other colleges, the big name programs that were once factors that aren't anymore. I think he's good. Whether he ends up at South Carolina or somewhere else, I think he's good. I don't know, what to say beyond that. But as far as a big drop in recruiting rankings, at least for 24/7, it's pretty negligible. He's at where he's sort of been since the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of, I guess, talking about the visit list. Not there's anything wrong with Duke and Central Florida and Georgia State for sure, but all right. So how about one of J.R. Johnson's former teammates, a guy that was scheduled to commit last month but has not pulled the trigger, four-star safety Kendall Daniels out of Norfolk, Virginia, 6'3", 190.
Yeah, not really sure what prompted him to put that off. All I've heard is that he just wanted to. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason behind it. Still think South Carolina's in a good spot. I haven't heard anything to make me think otherwise. So yeah, I mean, he was down for the spring game. He came to the spring game and was supposed to commit the next day. Announced where he was committing the next day. So I don't know. Maybe he just decided to back off because it was pretty obvious what might have happened if he announced a commitment the next day. So I don't know. Sometimes guys like to build interest. You look at what he does on social media, and this part of the deal with following this stuff. He seems to be pretty into like pumping up his teammates. Like Maury High School is a really good program. They have a lot of really good players. Obviously, if a guy's good enough to commit to South Carolina in back-to-back classes, they probably got a good team, and they're not the only ones. Like, you got a guy who's committed to Clemson right now, and Ari Watford, and had plenty of other players, high-level players. But they also got a lot of Division II, Division III, lower-level type of guys, and he seems to hype those guys up pretty good. So I don't know. Maybe there's something with that. Like, it's a spring, coaches are hitting the road. Maybe he wants to try to help get as many college coaches to want to come by the school. So maybe I'm wrong, but again, I haven't heard anything to suggest South Carolina isn't in a good spot. That's my assumption still, and we'll see what happens in June in terms of official visits. I would guess whether he's announced anywhere or not that he will be in for an official visit at some point next month.
All right, so let's go to linebacker. AJ Holloway, a guy out of Buford, who had an interview with Phil Kornblut where I think he said he's visiting Louisville on May the 31st and then South Carolina on June the 7th, and may be ready to commit then. 6'2", 225. South Carolina is going to lose a number of linebackers after this year, so it's going to be a very important position. You got him and Zayden Walker, and then you got some guys that kind of are in the mold of Fred Johnson, 6'3", 6'4", 210, 215 kind of guys that are visiting, like Jaden Breaker, Tayshawn Alston, and Donovan Darden, who is from Havelock, North Carolina, where my good friend Brad Lawing got his start in coaching. Corey Robinson, Pharaoh Cooper, both from that school. Going into official visits, how do you like South Carolina's chances with some of these guys?
Yeah, I think Breaker and Darden, I think I like their chances out of that kind of trio that you just laid out there, those two and Alston. Alston, he's being recruited here as a linebacker, but he plays defensive end, and I think some of the other schools are recruiting him as a defensive end. I assume South Carolina is going to continue to look at him as a linebacker, but I think he would rather play edge. I don't know for sure, but I think that's his preference. So yeah, I say all that to say I like Breaker and Darden in terms of who South Carolina's got a better chance at. Out of those three guys, I like South Carolina's chances with those two better than Alston right now.
All right, so how about a guy that Jared Smith, 6'6", 235 out of Alabaster, Alabama. Steve Wiltfong, the Oracle for 24/7, now back with On 3. Wiltfong placed a prediction for South Carolina. How do you, heading into the summer, how do you like the Gamecocks' chances with Jared Smith?
Yeah, South Carolina, they're in a good spot, and obviously that pick reflects that. I'm not ready to put one in because what I've been told is that Smith will take his official visits, and after that is when he's going to decide. And he's got some pretty sizable official visits after South Carolina, so maybe they can get him in the boat that weekend, but afterwards he's going to Georgia. The following weekend he's scheduled to go there. Week after that he's going to Tennessee, and after he finishes Tennessee, like a day or two later, he's going to Florida State, and he already went to Ole Miss in April. So yeah, that's stiff competition, and we've seen South Carolina win some recruiting battles here lately, particularly at defensive end. Sterling Lucas has done some good work there, but yeah, I'm not quite ready to call this one for Carolina. Maybe I'll be wrong here in 2 weeks, but I see who's looming, and I guess I kind of respect the competition. I respect the field for this one, the way it's currently constructed. So, but yeah, South Carolina is in a good spot. Let me be clear about that.
All right, good stuff. All right, so let's go to defensive tackle. So Kevin Wynn, 6'2", 320 from Greensboro, Georgia. Bryce Jenkins, who's a big kid who I think went to the same high school as Dylan Stewart, Friendship Academy. Is that Stewart or Nick Hart? I think that's Nick Stewart.
Yeah, you're right.
And then what about a blast from the past, Xavier Hardy, big kid out of Warner Robins who had to go to JUCO. How is the defensive tackle recruiting stacking up for Travian Robertson and the Gamecocks?
Well, the ball's finally rolling with Caleb Williams, which is a good sign.
Right.
Hardy's gotten quite a few offers since he's been at East Mississippi, which no surprise, right? I think we all expected that to happen as long as he played well, which he did. He's good. he did that and was taking care of business off the field. So I assume that he's turning in the right direction in both areas, which is why he's got an offer from Alabama, which is why he's got offers from other SEC teams. So I'm not real clear on where things are at right now with him in terms of his mind, but he's not committed to South Carolina. Hadn't been for a while. I believe they're still involved, but he's got an offer from Bama and some other folks. So it's a competitive marketplace for him. Again, it's how it goes for good defensive linemen. So we'll see what happens there. You mentioned Jenkins, Dylan Stewart's former high school teammate, who I don't think he's been down since the spring game last year in 2023. But he's coming in for an official visit. I'm scheduled to. You mentioned Wynn, and again, like
that's going to be a heavy lift, isn't it?
Stacked field for sure. Yeah, I mean he's from not far from Athens in Georgia. They like him. Florida State likes him. I mean, usual suspects. So, going to be tough to do. But Travian Robertson's made a good impression. I think they kind of have a similar disposition, just sort of like a silent assassin type. Like you talk to him and you're like, this guy's a defensive tackle, and you watch him play. It's like, this guy's a defensive tackle, and maybe there's a personality fit there. South Carolina's definitely in the mix, but definitely stiff competition. Was there? I can't remember if there's anybody else. Oh, they've offered a couple guys here recently. I think EJ Taylor, Eric Taylor, maybe. Which is that the name of the coach in Friday Night Lights, the TV show, Eric Taylor?
Honestly, I never watched that show. So
that's a whole nother podcast we need to
that is
get into. Eric Thomas is his name. Guy from Florida that Robertson just offered, who's probably going to be up for a visit at some point. Then there's Asaya Hammond, who's from Baltimore or around the Baltimore area, who's got an offer, but he's probably a come to camp type of guy.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of names, and again, like we talked about a little while ago, they got a bunch of names to replace. So they're involved with a lot of guys, and will continue to be involved with as many as possible, I'm sure. And however many they get from the high school level, you can probably count on them trying to hit the portal in December and beyond, however long it takes, because they need a bunch of them.
All right, so let's go to offense. And so first, obviously, South Carolina did not get their quarterback in Ryan Montgomery. He chose Georgia. And so is it more likely that they circle back on maybe a guy like a Will Wilson or transfer portal? What's your thoughts on quarterback recruiting?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot for sure. So I want to be careful with speculating with this position more so than I do with others. I would think all options are on the table at this point. I don't think Ryan Montgomery is as an option. He committed to Georgia, and I think that's where he's going to sign. And I don't think South Carolina is going to try to flip him. So I say all options are on the table, but maybe not that one. So whether that's trying to get a guy who's committed somewhere else, whether it's Will Wilson or Cutter Woods or whoever else, or a guy who's not committed somewhere else, or the portal, or maybe a combination of the two. It's probably also going to depend on how the current quarterback roster takes shape over the next 6-7 months. So it's still to be determined, definitely for me and what I know for sure.
All right, so last weekend I happened to do Franklin High School's baseball playoff series. That is the home of running back Jaden Jackson, who I've been told is closer to 6 foot than 5'10", about 220. His mom still owns most of the track records at that school. She's about 5'5". His dad's 6'6", 345 pounds. He's got a younger brother who's probably going to be a linebacker or defensive end who's already 6'2". And from talking to some of the baseball players and also another source over there, I think South Carolina's in really good shape for Jaden Jackson. How would you kind of categorize running back recruiting for South Carolina right now? I know there's Jeff Overton. I think they're from Virginia, and a couple of guys from the Memphis area that got offers. Maybe there are other positions. I can't remember. I know that's where Marquell Blackwell went recruiting earlier.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at my list of offers from May that I know about for 2025s, and I got 6 running backs. One of the most recent one is Gerard Pringle, who's from Florida. I can't remember where in Florida, but he's committed to Miami. I think he's Tampa area. So yeah, six of them who just got offered. I mentioned Pringle's committed. There's another who's committed to Southern Cal. There might be one of these other guys who's committed too, but at this point, I think Jackson. They're probably in the best position for Jackson, and maybe that's more a product of his options, which I'm a little surprised, quite frankly, that he doesn't have more, because he looks like a really good player. He plays. Correct me if I'm wrong, Keith. There's only one level of Texas high school football that's smaller than the one he plays at that isn't 6-man football or 8-man football, whatever that is they play.
So
Franklin, it's a really small school, isn't it?
Franklin's 3A.
Oh, it is? Okay. So it's not that small?
No.
Okay. Well,
they're
nonetheless, I think he's won a state championship.
It's a smaller school. It's a rural area, but a ton of athletes come out of there. And obviously there's a lot bigger schools because of 4A, 2 divisions, 5A, 2 divisions, 6A. I think they have 2 divisions. So, I mean, you do have 2A and single A, and then you have 6-man. But I mean, they're a 3A program.
Okay, so not tiny. Either way, like they're really good.
Not like Blackville Hilda.
Yeah. It's a really good football program, right? Like I do know that they've played.
It's a great athletic program overall.
Yeah. So he plays in an offense that's kind of fun to watch. Just looking at the highlights.
Split T.
Yeah, they're playing in a phone booth, and he makes a lot of. He's got to make a lot of guys miss, and he does, and he's got great stats.
The quarterback is a pitcher on the baseball team. He's going to Tulsa, and he throws seeds for sure. But they're all just really good athletes that all play multiple sports.
Yeah, he's a good player, man. I don't know if maybe they think of him as like a young Oscar Attaway or something like that. Is maybe. I
think that's a good comparison.
Yeah. He's an interesting player, man. I don't know that he's like, some freak athlete, and obviously he doesn't have a ton of offers, so like he's not, everybody's 5-star by any means, but I think he's good. Like I watch his highlights, and if you see running backs who are he's like 5'11", 215 pounds.
Yeah.
They may not be the fastest guys. They may not be the shiftiest guys, but they're making people miss. Like they got really good feet and lateral agility, quickness. From what I can see on this computer screen that I'm staring at, it looks good. He's making a lot of people miss out there and doing it in a phone booth. So I think he's an interesting player for sure.
All right, so last question. How about on the offensive line? I mean, South Carolina's doing a great job this cycle in Virginia. they've got 2 public commitments already. We talked about Kendall Daniels, but Jalen Gilchrist seems like another guy that they are really in the ball game with.
They are, yeah. He's been down a bunch. I think they're in really good spot for him. There's the Isaac Souls Jr. He's
from Louisville.
Yeah, he's from Louisville, and he'll probably be a center. He's 6'2", 295, so he's not a big guy, but he's got incredibly long arms for somebody who's 6'2". I think it's more than 80 inches on the wingspan, going back to 80+ inch of wingspan. I mean, Quay Dodd's got one, and he's 6'5", and I'm pretty sure that Solis has 80+ wingspan, and he's maybe 6'2". So not bad for a center. So they're in a good spot with him too. They're trying to stay in it with guys like Cortez Smith, who's from Georgia, and got schools like Georgia and whoever else, Juan Gaston, big tackle from Atlanta. So they're in the mix for a lot of guys. They did offer another offensive lineman earlier this week. I think Taryn Hedrick is his name, from Florida. So yeah,
they got Shedrick Surratt.
Shed Surratt, yeah, and he's committing
June 14th.
June 14th is the date. Yep, I was going to say middle of June. From Gaffney, and they're in a good spot with him too. I got a crystal ball in. JC and Tony have done it too. Got the official visit to Carolina. Can't remember if it's before or after, but he's got an official visit already.
21st.
There you go. So it's after. And I think the only other one he's got scheduled is Purdue, but he's got some pretty good offer sheet too. So yeah, that would be if that's where South Carolina's starting their O-line class. Another really good in-state guy, just continuing that trend that we've seen in South Carolina in the last few years now.
All right, good stuff. Well, hey, Hale, I can't thank you enough for being on with us today. Tell us what you got coming up on thebigspur.com. Yeah,
I'm gonna try to get something else cranked out from last night's welcome home stop in Spartanburg, when was part of an interview with Shane Beamer that he does with media folks at every stop. So I got a little bit more out of that. Got some recruiting things coming up, trying to get out and seeing some of these guys around the state, 2025s, 2026s. So yeah, there's going to be plenty of stuff that way, continuing that. I'm not the only one who's doing it either. Alex Jones is hitting the road and seeing some guys too. We're both going to be doing that here this week. So lots to come that way for sure.
All right. Well, Hale, can't thank you enough. Great stuff as always. Safe travels, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
I appreciate it, Keith. Always enjoyed being on with you. Thank you.
All right. That was the great Hale McGranahan talking all things Gamecock football recruiting. Really a lot of great stuff there, going through the board on offense and defense. Going back in the day to Paul Vogel from Eastside High School, my dear friend Jimmy Johnson, who's no longer with us, was very tight with him. Man, Paul Vogel, he was a stud linebacker back in the day. All right, tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily, Peyton Titus from the state and Go Gamecocks will be my guest. We'll be talking Gamecock women's basketball. We'll be talking about the schedule, which is coming together, the opponent for the Hall of Fame series November 4th. In Las Vegas, announced it will be the Michigan Wolverines. And I was really hoping for Southern Cal. Very disappointed with that. One of the analysts, I think, for 24/7, Talia Goodman, I think she's got Southern Cal ranked number 1 over the Gamecocks. Still to be determined if South Carolina takes anybody out of the portal or adds another player to the roster. I really don't think they will, but you never say never. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Asia Wilson's homecoming, what that was like, the announcement of her Nike signature shoe. We'll talk about Caitlin Clark got welcomed to the league last night. I watched just a little bit. I watched her travel a couple times. I saw her complain about, like she always does, about getting fouled. Kind of like LeBron James. I mean, that's why most people, or not most, but a lot of people really don't like LeBron James. But let me tell you something. I watched Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan play, and they cried about foul calls just as much as LeBron. But Caitlin Clark, I mean, I think anytime somebody breathes on her, she expects to get a foul. Guess what, girl? You are no longer in a cornfield in Iowa. Okay. By the way, her college coach, Lisa Bluter, she announced her retirement because I don't think she was getting any significant transfers. And it's like I said, remember when Larry Bird played for Indiana State? Well, they were in the national championship against Magic Johnson's team. And then after Larry Bird left, you never heard from them anymore. So they promoted one of her longtime assistants. Like I've always said, generally the longtime number two is a number two for a reason, because they're not a number one. And it's also the toughest deal in sports to go from being a number two to a number one in the same place. Stanford did the same thing. We'll see how they fare with that. I think they're joining the ACC, Stanford. It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? We'll keep getting into all this proposed changes. There's rumors about Kansas joining the SEC. Well, Kansas is not coming by themselves because you're not going to have 17 teams. I've said I think the SEC eventually goes to, and the Big Ten go to 24 team super conferences. I still think Clemson and Florida State make the most sense for the SEC. So we'll see what happens. But there's certainly stuff out there about that. But looking forward to Peyton Titus on Thursday, and then we'll close it out the week on Friday. I'm back. Appreciate everybody's confidence, condolences on the leg injury. Man, that thing hurts. So I'm getting ready to go put some ice on it. Thanks to everybody for tuning in today. Join us on Gamecock Pod Daily tomorrow. Peyton Titus talking a lot of Gamecock women's basketball. Wanted to get her on today, but she was too busy. So that should be a great pod tomorrow. Maybe on Friday, if my guy Jordan Kay is recovered from his trip to Cuba, he gets back tomorrow. So I don't think we'll probably try to hit him up next week. So again, great stuff. Special thanks to Hale McGranahan for joining me today, talking all things Gamecock football recruiting. I think the only position we didn't cover was tight ends, and I think we pretty much know that it's probably going to be the kid from Hammond, Mike Tyler, 6'4", 225, and maybe Preston Douglas from North Palm Beach, Florida. I think those are the top two targets there. So really appreciate Hale in such detail going down the recruiting board. All right, so until tomorrow, this has been Gamecock Pod Live, episode number 1483. I'll be back tomorrow with Peyton Titus. Thanks to all of you, to Jared, to Craig, to my guy, Carolina Titan, and everybody else. This is Keith Allsep saying God bless and go Gamecocks. I'm out of here.